but the actual Israelites who witnessed all this stuff are like, I don't know, we probably should have just died in Egypt. Would have been better for us, you know?
Hey, Moses, did you tell him about how it took so long to find water?
Yeah.
Jethro's like, well, yeah, that's pretty nice that you're able to get them all out of there, but what's this I'm hearing about them being thirsty? Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Eating the Apple. I'm Jeff.
I'm Chris.
And at the end of the last episode, the Israelites were, what happened at the end of 16? Oh, they were grumbling and grumbling.
16.
They didn't have any manna.
Yeah, and they got the quail too.
Oh, yeah, they got quail. They didn't mention a whole lot about quail, except they got quail whenever they were like, all right, the Lord's going to give you some meat. And then after that, I was like, and I hope you like bread.
Yeah, I think that's odd too. We didn't mention that, but like everybody talks about manna, you know,
Yeah.
but nobody mentions the quail. Like, isn't that equally as miraculous?
Yeah, you're darn right. I can't. We just skipped right over the quail because they get that sweet manna.
They're so delicious too.
We're about to encounter the Amalekites. Chapter 17. The whole Israelite community set out from the desert of Sin, traveling from place to place as the Lord commanded. They camped at Rephidim. Rephidim is about 2/3 of the way down. Once you cross over the Gulf there, I forget what that little piece of water is called. Basically, as they're traveling south in the Sinai Peninsula, Rephidim is about 2/3 of the way to Mount Sinai, right?
Supposedly.
So yeah, according to my pocket Bible atlas that I got for $5. So
yeah, that's what my atlas said as well, but it's just got a question mark. Like there's no explanation. It just says Rephidim ?
Maybe. So they quarreled with Moses. So now they're openly hostile. They said, "Give us water to drink." He said, "Give us water to drink." They don't want to help themselves. Moses replied, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you put the Lord to the test?" But the people were thirsty.
Yeah, again with the cult leader stuff. You know, what?
I
don't know what else to say about it.
Yeah. Okay, I got you. But the people were thirsty for water, and they kept grumbling. They said, "Why did you bring us out of Egypt to make us and our children and livestock die for thirst?" And Moses said to the Lord, "What am I to do with these people? They're almost ready to stone me." And God says to him, he says, "Go out in front of the people, take with you some of the elders, and take your hand in the staff with which you struck the Nile, and go." And see that he mentions a reason why they shouldn't be upset, right? Don't forget, take that same staff that you did perform these miracles with, and go by the rock at Horeb. Go ahead, you were going to say something?
No, I was just going to say I read something about that staff, and one of the explanations is that it could have been made of sapphire.
Oh, wow.
Which, if that's the case, like, you know, so it was again in this Encyclopedia of Jewish Myth, Magic, and Mysticism. They talk about. I got
was that written by guest of the program, our friend of the program, Rabbi Jeffrey Dennis?
Yes, it's excellent. I recommend it to everybody. This thing is, if you're interested in magic and shit like that, this thing is great. Let's see. It says in the Bible, the staff of Aaron was transformed into a serpent and was an instrument for summoning the first 3 plagues against Egypt. Where does it come? It says some people say that it might have been a rod that was given to Adam whenever he was kicked out of the Eden. It says this rod, created on the eve of the 6th day, was made of either sapphire or almond wood and bore an inscription of the Tetragrammaton, as well as an acrostic vase constructed from the initials for the 10 plagues. It radiated light from the divine name. Like Excalibur, only the rightful owner could withdraw the rod once it was placed in the ground.
Wow.
Yeah. Awesome stuff. I love that book. I really do.
That's cool.
We need to have Rabbi Dennis back on sometime.
Oh, that'd be great. Friend of the program. I wonder if the fact that he uses the word tetragrammaton, I wonder if there's like, if that theory that he's espousing there was like post Greek exposure to the text, to the story, or you know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's not a word they would have used back then.
Yeah, because I only read part of the entry. It does kind of imply that this is from later, you know, musings and things like that. So I would say so. Probably after. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So let's see. So they just keep on complaining, and he goes to the rock and he strikes the rock. I'm sorry, the Lord is telling him to do this. Go to the rock, strike it, and water will come out for the people to drink. So Moses did this in the sight of the elders of Israel. So now he's saying, look, watch me do this, elders. And he called the place Massa and Meribah because the Israelites quarreled and because they tested the Lord, saying, is the Lord among us or not? So, okay.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this whole time, all this, the grumblings and things, and, they've had all this, definite miracles from the Lord. How are they coming to this conclusion? You know what I mean? But you think about it, God waited until they were on death's door, thirsty almost, to give them water. He didn't think, I gave you quail, I gave you bread, but nothing to drink. You know what I mean? So I can kind of see, like, is he really with us or not? Is this, is he going to kill us? What is this?
Yeah. No, I'm 100% with you there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we don't hear any stories of people, being advocates for themselves. You know what I mean? Acting in their own best interest. It's all we're going to follow Moses because he told us to, because he's got the magic staff. But you don't hear the most, ingenious among them decided to dig a well to see if they could get water. We don't hear any of that. It's always just the squeaky wheels trying to get grease.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so out of nowhere, the Amalekites came and attacked the Israelites. Now, this is the next verse. The Amalekites came and attacked the Israelites at Rephidim. Moses said to Joshua, have we met Joshua yet? This is our first instance of hearing of Joshua, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Moses said to...
No.
Yeah, no, there's no way.
No, this is the first, yeah.
Right. And so, we don't know anything about this guy. So Moses said to Joshua, choose some of our men and go out and fight them. Fight the Amalekites. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the staff of God in my hands. And that's all Joshua needed to hear. So he goes out and he fights the Amalekites just like Moses ordered. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur, H-U-R, another character that we're just now meeting, went to the top of the hill. As long as Moses held up his hands, the Israelites were winning. But whenever he lowered his hands, the Amalekites were winning. So when Moses' hands grew tired, they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. Aaron and Hur held his hands up, one on one side and one on the other, so that his hands remained steady until sunset. That's cheating. That's not the same as holding your hands up. I'm just going to say that. You're not holding your hands up. You're resting your hands. Either they're down here or up here. Either way, you're resting your hands, right? So it wasn't just the fact that his staff was in the air that the Israelites were able to overcome the Amalekites, I guess. Or the Amalekites were so damn scared of his staff, they're like, there it is!
Yeah. There's another thing that is kind of, I don't know if you've seen anything on it. One of the Catholic Bibles that I've been referencing has a note that said the rock that provided the water after it was struck by this magical rod followed them through the desert to give them water for 40 years.
What?
Yeah.
No. The Catholic Bible said that?
Yeah, it was a note. I think it was, let's see, let me change this. I think it was in the New Catholic Bible.
While you're looking that up, I just want to mention the one chiasm that I have for chapter 17 is the center of that chiasm is in verse 12. They took a stone and put it under him, and he sat thereon. So that's the center of that chiasm. There's a lot of mentioning of hands, Joshua defeating Amalek, the Amalekites. So anyway,
I'm not finding it now. It might have been in the physical Bible that I have that I don't have it at arm's reach right now. So, but the note specifically, what I wrote down in my notes says that the New Catholic Bible, I'm not 100% sure that's the right one, but it says the notes say that some rabbis and Paul thought that the rock followed them through the desert.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, it's funny. So you mentioned Paul. We start talking about when we start getting into the Greek interpretations of the Septuagint. I actually have a note about that. Something that I was kind of questioning. So Joshua is Hoshua, and the Greek version of that name is Yeshua. That's Jesus' name, Yeshua. So Joshua, as far as the Greeks are concerned, have the same name as Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm wondering if there's anything to that. Is there, whenever we get this character here who's willing to overcome who can overcome the Amalekites with the sword, via the sword, you've read the New Testament. Are there any correlations to Jesus in Joshua's character? Is the
So
warriors that we're meeting?
I'm super not versed on a bunch of that stuff. Like,
Okay.
I was a kind of a typical Christian back in the day, and I just kind of accepted stuff whenever it was told to me.
Okay.
And I didn't have an interest in finding the Old Testament, New Testament links. Like,
Wow.
it wasn't necessary. I already
Okay.
believed, so I didn't need to look into this.
Okay.
So I don't remember anything. I'm sure
Okay.
there probably are, but also these names are recycled so much. It's like
Mm,
uh, in the Hispanic world, Jesus is a very common name, and we don't really do that in the English,
anglicized. Yeah.
yeah, and that kind of stuff. But I see it as a similar kind of thing where it's just they're giving them a name that had some meaning from their faith. You
Right.
know,
Okay. Fair enough. Um, well, then picking right back up with verse 14, the Lord said to Moses, "Write this on a scroll as something to be remembered, and make sure that Joshua hears it, because I will completely blot out the name of Amalek from under heaven."
blot
So
out the
he's
name of
saying
who?
Amalek, the
Who?
Amalekites. Oh, yeah, I haven't heard of these. This guy. Moses built an altar and called it, "The Lord is my banner." He said, because hands were lifted up against the throne of the Lord, and the Lord will be at war against the Amalekites from generation to generation. All right.
Yeah,
So
that's not. He didn't do very good job, blotting the name out.
yeah, there you go. Exactly. So in 16, when he says that hands were lifted up against the throne of the Lord, I like how they use that kind of imagery to kind of what's the word, to juxtapose against Moses' hand being raised. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
his
it's
hands
kind of a
being raised.
passive because the hand was up and not necessarily raised. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, yeah, true.
Yeah.
Um,
But
yeah,
also, like, why does Joshua need to know this? Why is Joshua supposed to know that he's going to write this down and completely blot out? Why write it down if you're going to blot it out in the first place? But why does Joshua need to know?
I'm assuming so. We're foreshadowing a little bit, but Joshua's he's gonna be the person that takes over the Exodus, right? Moses isn't gonna make it the entire way, and Joshua's gonna be the leader eventually. And it's through knowing that God had this intention for the Amalekites that Joshua's going to continue his conquest of all the other people, right?
Okay,
Well, I'm
I
just
can
saying
see that.
that's just some BS I made up right now. I have no
Well,
idea
no, but
because
I can see that. I don't remember. I know Joshua is the one that takes over like the military campaign stuff, but I'm not sure if he's the leader.
oh okay, fair
I,
enough.
I might not be remembering that right, but that's an interpretation that could work.
That's how I know Joshua from my own, just through like what I've
Hmm.
gathered through in civilization. Like Joshua is that person, but I'm assuming then the reason why we wanted to write it down is so that Joshua knows that this is the Lord's will, that He wants, that Adonai
Yeah,
wants these people wiped out. This is basically the first instance of if you meet resistance, crush it with no white flag, right? No quarter. Like you're going to destroy any opposition.
yeah. That might be a little bit of a stretch, but I could see it. That's I think it's a valid interpretation, at least for the moment.
Thank you. Okay, so here's what's cool. Here's a part that I really started to enjoy. Unless did you want to have any? Did you have anything else on 17? 17 is a pretty quick little. It's interesting
Nope.
because we have two very important things happening in 17, but there's hardly any context for either one of them. The water coming from the rock, and then
Yep.
Joshua, who's that, and her, who's that, defeating the Amalekites. You know what I mean? So, and then moving right on to Jethro coming from Midian and visiting Moses, right?
Hmm.
Jethro apparently
So go ahead.
no. I might be onto something that you don't want to that you weren't willing to cover. So by all means,
No, no. We like I said, we could totally cover whatever. Um, I was just saying that like the fringe stuff is more where I like to sit. But the thing about this is, it's okay. So Jethro's a priest of Midian, and he's coming to visit. It says that he sent the kids away when that happened or whatever. But my thing is like the reason I have a suspicion that they might have been in Midian in the first place and not in the Sinai Peninsula is this
hmm,
because unless God told Jethro, you need to come and this is where you need to go, had to have been close enough that people would have been like, "Oh man, I heard that there's these people having this battle, in this valley or whatever."
Hmm.
So that's why. That's all I wanted to get at.
Hmm. Yeah. There's an assumption in there that this stuff is linear,
Yeah,
and that it's factual. You know what I mean? You know. So, but that's definitely valid. There's who's to say, right?
yeah.
It's definitely a valid interpretation. So let's see. So Jethro, the priest of Midian and father-in-law of Moses, heard of everything God had done for Moses and for the people of Israel, and how the Lord had brought the people out of Egypt, brought
Hmm.
Israel out of Egypt. After Moses had sent away his wife Zipporah, his father-in-law Jethro received her and her 2 sons. Why is he sending her away?
Yeah,
Is it
and
because there's a
when?
battle happening? Right? Yeah, when? That's a good point. We don't. He never. This is the first we've seen of them. This is the first we've heard of them since his trek to Egypt.
Yeah, exactly.
They were non-existent while he was doing all of the Lord's bidding in Egypt. And so we are reminded that he had one son named Gershom, meaning I'm a foreigner in a foreign land, and one named Eleazar, for he said, "My father's God was my helper, and he saved me from the sword of Pharaoh."
Yeah. So the timing of this is interesting to me. Like, didn't he have the kids before? Didn't it mention in multiple kids before he went to
Yeah.
Egypt?
Mm-hmm.
So why would he name them these things? Like the Gershom, I can kind of understand, has been a foreigner in a foreign land because he went to Midian.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of makes sense. But the second one, unless she got pregnant or at least had the kid after the plagues,
Mm-hmm.
when was she sent away? And like, was she sent away to give birth? I, I, I should have looked this up, but I
Well,
think it mentioned children
he
before
definitely
on
had
the
both
way.
kids. He had two
Yeah. Okay.
kids, and
Yeah.
then the father's God was my helper. He saved me from the sword of Pharaoh. So Moses was saved from the sword of Pharaoh when he fled, and that's when he
But he
met
did.
Zipporah.
Okay. I could see maybe him thinking that, but I don't think there was anything like there was any mention that Pharaoh even knew anything had happened. You know what I mean?
Well, no, there was. So if I recall correctly, Pharaoh heard it was a very quick thing. The Hebrew said, "Are you going to kill me like you did that Egyptian man?"
Right.
And in the next sentence, Pharaoh heard of what Moses did, and Moses
Oh,
fled. It was like
okay. I think you're
super
right.
quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
I guess I forgot it.
that said, I don't know. At that point, did we have any textual exposure to Moses knowing of this Hebrew God of Yahweh? Right. I don't know if
Hmm.
we did. And so, if for him to have named his son Eleazar, meaning my father's God was my helper, he hadn't met. Oh yes, he did. He did see the burning bush before he had the kids. Did he see the
I,
burning bush before he had kids with Zipporah?
I don't think that was before. I think it was after because the timeline seems to be that he went and he lived 40 years, had these kids, and then he went and saw the burning bush, and then
Yes,
he went gathered up his family and took off because
that's right.
Aaron was already on the way out.
He saw the burning bush because he was working for Jethro. He was shepherding
Yeah.
his flock, and he somehow wandered up a mountain.
But see, that's the thing. He was in Midian with Jethro,
Uh huh.
tending his flocks. Now he
Right.
could have taken the flocks back into Sinai, I guess,
Uh huh.
to the mountain of God, but it sounds to me like it's in Midian. You know,
Mm. No, 100%. Because we talked about it. We talked about it then that where Midian is in present day Saudi Arabia, you have to go up and around the Red Sea to get down to the Sinai Peninsula to get to Mount Sinai.
yeah,
This is a 600-mile walk with flocks. Jethro's going to be like, "Where's that son-in-law of mine?
yeah,
Like where's all
exactly,
my
yeah,
goats?
yeah.
So yeah, so interesting too because Aaron also has a son named Eleazar, and but I have no problem with that because my father's God was my helper. He saved me from the sword of Pharaoh. Aaron has every reason to call his son Eleazar. He has for the same reason that Moses named his son. Aaron can
Yeah,
name his son that same thing. I think that's pretty neat. That's a pretty cool correlation.
yeah,
Um, so let me double check. So Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, together with Moses' sons and wife, came to him in the wilderness, where he camped near the mountain of God.
yeah. So that's also kind of a thing. Talks about they left Egypt and they spent a month there where they were supposed to look confused.
Mm-hmm.
It says they spent a month there, and then they're wandering in the desert and the water and everything else, but now they're camped at the mountain of God.
Uh-huh.
That's where they are when Jethro comes up.
Right.
Just to keep that in mind for something that's coming.
Yeah, and I think Jethro is Moses' father-in-law. They don't mention it. So together with Moses' sons and wife came to the wilderness, yes, Jethro had sent word to him, I, your father-in-law Jethro, okay, there we go, I knew it, am coming to you with your wife and her 2 sons, with your wife and her 2 sons.
Yep.
You own her, she owns them. So Moses went out to meet his father-in-law. Oh, that must be Jethro. And bowed down and kissed him. What's that?
It must be.
Yeah, and bowed down and kissed him. They greeted each other and then went into the tent. And Moses told his father-in-law about everything the Lord had done to Pharaoh and the Egyptians for Israel's sake, and about all the hardships.
I thought Jethro had already heard that stuff, and that's why he came.
Right. So what I'm thinking is, just like I heard you did this one major thing, now I'm coming. I'm like, tell me everything. I want to hear the story.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair.
And then, so this is Jethro speaking. He was delighted to hear about all the good things the Lord had done for Israel. And he said to Moses, praise be the Lord who rescued you from the hand of the Egyptians and of Pharaoh, and who rescued the people from the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know the Lord is greater than all of the other gods, for he did this to those who had treated Israel arrogantly. And then,
So if Jethro's a priest of some other god in Midian, or gods, how does this affect his life? Is he going to go back to Midian and preach to, the word of Yahweh, or
just go back to? I wonder if we're getting hung up on a modern definition of the word priest, because I feel like that, like we've discussed before, priest could simply mean the person that is like the overseer of this land. Just like in Egypt, they had priests.
I don't think I've ever heard priest be used in a non-religious context, though.
Well, I think, maybe not religious, maybe not non-religious, but certainly, but not necessarily. We were talking earlier about the different priests that they talk about all the priests of Egypt. We're talking about people who they're more or less governmental functionaries. And while that might not be the exact same thing as what Jethro is in Midian, I think using that interpretation, it has more to do with the fact that he's in charge. He's kind of like in charge of what's happening in this area. Now, as far as like being a preacher, someone whose job it is to spread the word of God or whatever, he's a descendant of Ishmael. They believe in the same God. It's just different interpretations of the story, right? Is there any reason to think that that's not the case?
Maybe. I mean, that part kind of makes sense, but I don't buy into the governmental part of it. Like, yes, the priests were in Egypt were part of the government. Obviously, you can have different ministers and stuff in the UK, and we've got secretaries and things for ours. But it's always still, the priest is always a religious context. They were part of the government overseeing worship and how to do it, making sure it's done properly, doing things on behalf of the state, religiously. So I really don't think that it could have just meant, he's the guy in charge of this area. He's the chieftain. I don't buy that.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair enough. I tried to do a quick Google search and I didn't get anything. Worth a crap. So we'll just move on, and that's fair. We'll move on and try to try to consider more about what that could mean. So let's say that he is in charge of religious. He has a religious duty. You're saying that you're asking, does his acknowledgement that Yahweh or that Adonai is the best, the highest God, is how you're asking is like, how's that going to change like what he does and like how he feels towards?
Yeah, because even if you say he's already knew about Yahweh because of his lineage or whatever, he definitely now sees that the Hebrews or Israelites are our God's people. They're the chosen ones. Is that going to affect the way he does things?
So I'll go ahead and I'll spoil something that I had planned for later in the chapter. Whenever in 27, when Moses sent his father-in-law on his way and Jethro returned to his own country, I want to say it was Rashi. Let me double check. Yes. Rashi says that he goes back to Midian to convert the Midianites. So to answer your question, yes.
Okay.
That is okay.
Yeah. One other thing I did have for this one part, because it says, I thought this was so odd. In verse 11, it says that the Egyptians, they had dealt arrogantly with him. And there's lots of
Mm-hmm.
different versions of this, but you would think if his people had been enslaved by the Egyptians and tormented and had the firstborn killed in an effort to wipe them out, that you would refer to them, criticize it more heavily than just saying they were arrogant, you know,
Mm-hmm.
they were uppity, they were hoity toity. It just seems,
Yeah.
I
Oh,
don't know how to put it.
that's interesting. So 11. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all the gods, for He did this to those who had treated Israel arrogantly. Okay, that's interesting. I like that. Here's what Rashi has to say about that. When it comes to Eric, in this Jewish interpretation I'm reading now, it says that they plotted against them. They didn't treat them arrogantly; they plotted against them, is what it says.
Okay.
And then what Rashi has to say is that they planned wickedly. They very the very pot in which they cooked, they themselves were cooked. So they threw the Israelites into the newborns into the Nile. Moses showed them that look at all this blood. This blood is on your hands. These are our babies that you've killed. And so then the Pharaoh and all of the armies were destroyed by crashing water.
So, but how? I don't think they actually did though, because remember he said that the prescription from Pharaoh was to throw all the firstborn males into the Nile.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't specify at what age the cutoff was for that, for one thing. But it says that the midwives didn't do it. They refused.
Right.
They said, oh, they give birth before we have a chance to get there. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't see that actually happened.
I had the same hang up. So it was Shua and Pela, I think, were the names of the midwives. They give us the names of two midwives, and I think the theme there back in chapter 3 or whatever it was that here are these women rising up against the Pharaoh, right? And and look at how women play a part in all of this, with the princess saving Moses or whatever, and his sister. But you're right. I had the same hangup because it doesn't explicitly say that they did throw the babies in the Nile. But all
Mm-hmm.
of the interpretations I'm reading from different rabbis, different rabbinical sources, and other interpretations, it's taken as a given that this is what they did. They
Right.
threw them all in the river, and that the only salvation the only Hebrew or the only babies that were saved were the ones that were explicitly called out as being saved. The ones that these midwives were like, "Oh, these Hebrew women, they give birth too quickly, so we can't get there in time."
So at what point, like, how do they have an army then? Fighting age men at this point,
No, yeah,
you
no,
know?
definitely. Yeah,
I don't.
It's a good point. How would they? How are their children? All the firstborn. When did they stop that? When did they stop doing that? At this point, we were to the. This was the Pharaoh for whom Joseph meant nothing, right? So
Yeah.
like, yeah, that means that's the most recent Pharaoh. It's not like it was a generations ago and we've recovered. You know,
Right.
great question. I had the same thought. I'm sad that we didn't touch on it then, but yeah, that what the heck. So the next day, oh, I'm sorry, I almost skipped the feast. Jethro was delighted to hear about all the good things. He praises the Lord, and when Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and other sacrifices to God, Aaron came with all of the elders of Israel to eat a meal with Moses' father-in-law in the presence of God. Um, Let me see. There was a chiasm here. Yes. So, verse 10, when Jethro said, "Blessed be the Lord who hath delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians and out of the hand of Pharaoh," that those are bracketed by whom he had delivered out of the hand of the Egyptians and who hath delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians,
Mm-hmm.
amongst other things. So that's a pretty neat little chiasm.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Um,
I also did note that Jethro is sitting here talking to him, and he just takes all this for granted. He's telling the stories, they're yakking. He takes it for granted, believes him, believes that God is great and doing all this, and he just takes it like that. But the actual Israelites who witnessed all this stuff are like, I don't know, we probably should have just died in Egypt. Would have been better for us.
Hey Moses, did you tell him about how it took so long to find water?
Yeah.
Jethro's like, well, yeah, that's pretty nice that you were able to get them all out of there, but what's this I'm hearing about them being thirsty? Moses is like, oh god.
I got around to it eventually.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I was about to tell you about how I found a log and I threw it in the water, and that was fine. That was good enough. Okay, so
I got the job done, didn't I?
yeah, exactly. What are you brushing off your shoulder? Oh, just manna flakes. Okay, then Jethro. Sorry. Okay, so he brings a burnt offering, and they sit. Okay, hold on a second. Verse 12. Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and other sacrifices to God, and Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat a meal with Moses, Moses' father-in-law, in the presence of God. They say that you're supposed to take note here that Moses is not being listed as people who are among those feasting. And they say, why not? Where's Moses supposed to be? He was
Yeah, I didn't even
serving.
catch that.
Yeah. Moses is serving the food. He's one of the people serving the food as he's done nonstop this entire time. He's a servant of the Lord. You know what I mean? He's making sure that everyone's full, all of these things. This is something that I think Foreman came up with in his Parsha Companion.
Came
Or
up with
something.
is a good description for it.
I don't mean to say. I don't mean to say that it was created whole cloth, but it's the thing.
Yeah.
That's where I first saw it, and I've seen it elsewhere too. But
No, I mean it had to have come from somewhere. I just don't. I don't know where that is because I haven't seen it.
It leads us into verse 13 where it says, the next day Moses took his seat to serve as judge for the people, and they stood around him from morning until evening. It's to kind of like give an air of aloofness to Moses. Like he's starting to kind of separate himself. He's like, my job is to serve, but because of that, I should have like my position's a little bit higher, right? And
well, yeah, and it gets in the verse 16. One of my notes was that it's another kind of cult leader moment. You know, that people come to me and I tell them what God says.
yeah,
You know,
that's true. And when father-in-law, when Jethro saw everyone gathering around him, he was like, "What are you doing? What's this you're doing for the people? What is this you're doing for the people? Why do you alone sit as judge while all these people stand around you from morning till evening?" And Moses said, because the people come to me to seek God's will. Whenever they have a dispute, it's brought to me, and I decide between the parties and inform them of God's decrees and instructions. Like you said, he's. I don't personally like the term cult leader, but I don't have any issue with you.
well,
Saying
I'm not saying that he is. I'm just saying that it sounds kind of like that. You know, you can imagine David Koresh or Jim Jones saying, you know, having this attitude of I'm the intermediary for God. What I say is what God wants.
Mm-hmm.
It just kind of has that air about it.
One note from Rashi for verse 13 was that when Moses took his seat to serve as judge, he had come down from the mountain. So he served everyone their meal. He went up to the mountain, which we can assume means that he was speaking to God or he was holding counsel with God.
Right.
He comes down to serve as judge, and Rashi says that day that he came down was Yom Kippur. So that's like there's a subtle establishment of that holiday with Moses' descent from the mountain. I don't know what to make of that just yet, but there's something there, according to
something
Rashi.
to think about.
Yeah. So Jethro sees what's happening. He sees everyone gathering around him, and Moses explicitly saying that he's taking everyone's quarrels to God for them, and he said that's not good. You and these people who come to you are only going to wear yourselves out. The work is too heavy for you. You cannot handle it alone. Listen to me, and God be with you. You must be the people's representative before God and bring their disputes to him. Teach them his decrees and instructions and show them the way they are to live and how they are to behave. But select capable men from all the people, men who fear God, trustworthy men who hate dishonest gain, and appoint them as officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. So the way he breaks that up, do you have any idea? Do you have any sense of what that means? Like when he says over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens?
Not exactly. I didn't give it a whole lot of thought. It just sounds to me like there's going to be, some people over a few people over them, a few people over them, and then, increasingly expanding the umbrella of control or,
right.
Yeah,
just
leadership.
There you go. Having a hierarchy of
right
officials. Have them. Oh, I will say that Rashi said that capable in this instance, in this context, means men of substance, people who can't be bought, can't be bribed. So that means they have wealth, they're people of means. That's essentially what men of substance means, which is kind of sad because to use the word substance is to infer substantiality. And that's not to say that they're any better than anyone else. They just simply can't be bribed or bought.
Right. Yeah, most of the translations I see have able men.
Right. And isn't that
Yeah.
strange? Like able. What is that? That's not the same thing as substantial, let alone wealthy.
No, but it kind of implies, I think, that they are capable of handling this properly. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Let's see. I'm catching up to my notes here. Okay, you and I both have notes for 1827, so we'll get there. Have them. This is still Jethro talking to Moses. Have them serve as judges for the people at all times, but have them bring every difficult case to you. So you're the guy. You're the ultimate arbiter. The simple cases they can decide themselves. This will make your load lighter, and because they'll share it with you. If you do this, and God so commands, you will be able to stand the strain, and all these people will go home satisfied. So he's looking out for Moses. He's afraid for
Yeah,
him.
I had a note about that. There's so many different versions of this, and it's one of those things where sometimes different versions will have different things, and some of them will be the same. But in this one, they're all practically different. The NIV has "go home satisfied." The NRSV says they'll go to their homes in peace. ESV has "go to their place in peace." The JPS has "go home unwearied." Friedman's translation, that uh, documentary hypothesis one, says "come to its place in peace," and the Catholic version says they'll arrive at peace in their destination. So it's odd to me that it was so different. You know what I mean? Like, why?
Why are
I
there
can't
why are there
I can't
differences?
parse it.
Right.
Why is it so different compared to everything else where there's differences, but they're all, like that some of them overlap. And in this case, just about everything I read is different.
Do you think that they're saying anything different though? Is
No,
there?
that's the confusing part to me. It's all
Yeah.
essentially the same, with the exception of the Catholic version. Arrive at the destination. To go home to content or whatever. It's like, I don't
Yeah.
know.
And it's because I mean, that's really awesome that you track that down. But if all those words are essentially the same thing, it's not like it changes the meaning. They're saying it. It
Well, but
sounds to me like they're saying the same thing.
a lot of them are saying essentially the same thing. They're going to go back to their homes, their tents, whatever, and be content, be satisfied with
Satisfied.
your
Judgment. You're ruling.
your judgment stuff. But then the Catholic version has arrive in peace at its destination, like it's foreshadowing making it to the promised land.
Oh, I like it. That's cool.
It is kind of cool, but again, it's just because it's so vastly different, but not. It's bending my brain.
That you know what? I like that better than going home satisfied because home is a place of dwelling. It's the place where you are you're most vulnerable. But what did the Catholic version say again?
Arrive in peace at its destination.
Arrive in peace at its destination. So
Yeah.
essentially, what
Where
they're
did that
saying
part
is
go?
just be. It sounds like they're saying, regardless of the outcome, you'll be contented, rather than there's no mention of like home or any of that stuff. It's basically saying, regardless of what we decide is the outcome, you're going to be content with it. I like that interpretation of it. That's neat. I mean, you can you know infer the same thing from the other translations, the other
Yeah,
interpretations, but
this other one says go home satisfied as well.
yeah.
I don't
So
know. Okay.
yeah, that's neat. Um, so Moses listened to his father-in-law and did everything he said. Now, okay, let me make sure. Yeah, Jethro gave him these instructions, but he did so humbly. He said, "Do these things so long as your God commands it." Right? But we don't hear. There's no mention here of any kind of conference with God, any counsel with God that Moses sought after these instructions from Jethro. So he just did it. He's like, okay, yeah, I'll do those
Well,
things.
Jethro kind of says, kind of implies that it'll only happen if God wills it. You know what I
Ah,
mean?
okay, fair enough.
Let's see, how
Yeah.
did he put it directly?
Um, let's see, where is it? If you do this, 23. If you do this and God so commands, you will be able to stand the strain.
Right. And God so commands.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but in the NASB it says if you do this and God so commands you, then you'll be able to endure. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I get what you're saying, and that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
So Moses listened to his father-in-law, did everything he said. He chose capable men from all over Israel, capable now, and from all over Israel and made them leaders of the people, officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. They served as judges for the people at all times. The difficult cases were brought to Moses, but the simple ones they decided themselves. And then Moses sent his father-in-law on his way, and Jethro returned to his own country. So,
So that kind of implies that he's not in Midian, and now he's going back to Midian.
100%.
But again, everything else kind of implies that the mountain of God is in Midian.
Yeah, and
I don't know.
you don't have to look hard to find claims that Mount Sinai is in not. It wouldn't be called Mount Sinai; it'd be called what, Mount Horeb.
No, I think it would be something else. Horeb is it's in the text. We haven't seen it yet, but it's a they get both of them like what's the word I'm looking for? They're conflated.
Okay.
It's like a parenthetical, also Mount Horeb kind of thing.
Well, that's what I mean. They wouldn't call it. You wouldn't call it Mount Sinai if it was in Midian. You'd call it Mount Horeb, right?
Well, the Israelites might.
Oh, really? They might call it Mount Sinai.
Could be a different. Well, it could be a different, word in their language. Could be the same mountain known by a different name.
Oh, sure.
You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. That's what. But they wouldn't specifically call it Mount Sinai, right? If it was in Midian, is that? Do you think that could still be the case?
Yeah, I don't see why it couldn't be.
It's because it's not in the Sinai Peninsula. Why is?
Well, was the Sinai Peninsula named before this, or did somebody say, "Okay, I think this is where Sinai was, so we're going to call this the Sinai Peninsula"?
Well, say Mount Sinai was called Mount Sinai and it was in Midian. Why would we call a Sinai Peninsula that? Right? But if it was
because it is lost. We don't this. Okay, so one, it didn't happen, but we don't know where it happened specifically. So people are taking an educated guess. That's why there's a cathedral there at the base of Mount Sinai in the Sinai Peninsula. They don't know that that's the right place. You know what I mean? Like the peninsula was named after because that's what somebody thought.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. But there was a term I was looking up. I can't remember if it's something we haven't come across. There's no way we've come across this in the Bible. But Jabal Musa, have you seen that?
Yeah.
So that's every time I've seen Mount Sinai being in Midian, it's always called Jabal Musa, Moses' mountain or Mountain Moses.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. So I think that does it for 8 or 27. We already mentioned that he sends his father-in-law. So Jethro, supposedly, according to Rashi, goes to spread the word of Yahweh, to preach for him. Let's see. Oh, okay. I'm going to go over a little bit of this, and I'm going to go ahead and forget a lot of what I read. But Foreman, in the Jethro, or what he calls the Yitro companion, Parsha companion, talks about how there are correlations between Moses' first meeting of Jethro and his second meeting of Jethro that go all the way through. And I actually sent you a screenshot of this, all the way through his receipt of the 10 Commandments. And I'm not going to remember every specific one, but it was he made some very interesting points when Moses, when he first met Jethro, he refused to eat. Now, I'm not saying he openly refused, but he didn't eat with his sister. He didn't eat with the daughters and Jethro. He had to be summoned, just like he didn't eat with them whenever Aaron and Jethro were all together and all of the elders were together. He had to be sought, right? And there were other correlations, and I'm forgetting them. Maybe I should have written them down, but they were all very interesting, and it goes all the way through to the receipt of the first commandment, where that basically says, "No other gods before me." Now that Jethro is, it was when Moses left Midian to go on his trek. Jethro was all for it. He's like, "Yes, you are clearly a prophet of this God. Go for it." And now Jethro makes the same conceit here. He says, "Clearly, your God is the most important one. I'm going to go back and spread the word." And there were others in between. And I was like, "That is so neat!" Like it's just amazing that we're capable of doing that as people. To pull all that stuff out of it. It was really neat. Anyway, probably could go into it, but it's better left for folks to explore that on their own, I think. So here we are. We were discussing Mount Sinai. Well, let's get into chapter 19, where we are at Mount Sinai. Let me move my Jewish Bible.
Well, see, so they're already there. They're at the mountain of God. They're talking about that being there with Jethro and everything else. So are we getting a retelling of how they came to get there in the first two verses, or is this them wandering yet again, leaving the mountain, doing a couple of loops, and coming back?
I think when I was reading it, I think it's the Venn diagram is the two circles are overlapped a little bit. I think we're getting a little bit of the story again. We're
Okay.
we're basically resetting the context for what's to come. Like we've already kind of gone over this, but that was in a different context. Now there's this context. That's the way I read it, but I really don't know. That's a good question. Maybe I didn't really stop and consider whether or not they had
Mhm.
left because I my one interpretation was that we're kind of like resetting the story a little bit.
Yeah. The thing that stood out to me, the reason why, is because it says on the third new moon.
Mm-hmm.
Because it talked about being like a month later
Mm-hmm.
they started this turning. They went to Rephidim or whatever, and now on the third moon, they're
Mm-hmm.
going doing it again, kind of thing.
Hmm.
So
On the third month, on the first day of the third moon after they left Egypt. So it's been 3 months. And when did it say they entered Rephidim after 1 month of being?
earlier, I can go back.
I'll admit that that's one thing that I don't really follow. I don't follow the chronology super well. I probably should because there's a lot of specific talk about what month we're in, new moons, things like
Yeah.
that. Which week of the month?
So the congregation in chapter 16, the congregation set out from Elim and entered the wilderness, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had departed Egypt. And then, so they're in the wilderness at that point. They've left Elim or whatever, and now it's the next month.
Yeah, it's
It's
been
the
2 weeks.
third month.
Yeah.
2 weeks.
Yeah, it's been 2 weeks from then, hasn't it? It's 15 days after the first month, so it's 15 days into the second month, right? That's what you
So
just said.
I think the 15 days I think is throwing you off a little bit. I think they spent a month there camped where they crossed, you know what I mean? And then
Uh,
they entered the wilderness that second month at the beginning of that second month. And now it's I don't know how exact. Okay, so maybe it's the 15 days throwing me off. It might be 2 weeks later. I don't know.
yeah. What
But
what were you? What verse were you just reading, or what chapter and verse?
the first two verses of chapter 16, I think.
Okay.
I know it's chapter 16. I don't remember the exact verses, but
Let me hop back there because that's neat. I want to figure.
yeah.
I want to see it. Okay.
So I'll stay on 19 so I can read that out to you.
In the desert, the whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month. Yeah, it sounds like 45 days or 44 days after they had come out of
Well, it
Egypt.
depends on what day they left Egypt.
The second month after that, I think the clock starts once they leave. That's what it sounds like to me. The second month after they had come out of Egypt.
Yeah,
So, and then so we'll call it a month and a half,
right.
and then on the first day of the third month. So once that second month was up, 2 more weeks, then we get to the first day. So it's 2 weeks this after this whole thing here at Elim. So yeah, I think it's a single. It's just one. There's no doubling back, as far as I can tell. But in that time, they slaughtered an entire army. They slaughtered an army. Jethro visited. They had a meal, and
So, but hang on. So it's saying that they, in 15 days, second month, whatever, 2 weeks previous, they departed and they're doing that. They're wandering in the wilderness or whatever, and then they come to the mountain and they camp there and they do the thing with Jethro and stuff.
yeah.
So this is saying that they left. Oh, we can cut all this out. This is boring. This is
Well,
pointless. But
all of the silence will be cut out.
right. But so it's saying that they entered here. It's saying that they entered the wilderness 2 weeks after they entered the wilderness in chapter 16. Is that what I'm
Right.
getting?
Well, no, I think they entered into Rephidim. What does 16 say? They come to Rephidim. They enter the desert of Sin. And they go through the desert of Sin. And
They entered the wilderness on the 15th day of the second month. Maybe I should be writing this down, keeping track of it better.
okay,
So
they entered. They came to the desert of Sin. They came to the desert of Sinai. Desert of Sin,
So
desert of Sinai, same thing, right?
right. So they're in the wilderness on 15th day of the second month, right? And they're
Yeah.
And then in 19, the third new moon, they entered the wilderness of Sinai.
No, so on the 15th day of the second month, they come to the desert of Sin. Okay. And then on the first day of the third month, they came to the desert of Sinai. Yeah, that's interesting. 2 weeks. Where'd those 2 weeks go? Maybe that's when they were fighting, because like it's not long after that they fight the Amalekites. Maybe that's what happened. They had to fight the Amalekites for 2 weeks. And yeah, so what are they doing? They came to the desert of Sinai. I don't know. What the hell? What's happening here?
I mean,
So,
they're it stands out to me because they're being specific for a reason, but the specifics are not lining up.
No, I'm with you. Okay, thanks for bringing me around to that. That's so strange. So I need to keep better track of that. So they're after they set out from Rephidim, verse 2, they entered the desert of Sinai again, and Israel camped there in the desert in front of the mountain. Then Moses went up to God, went up to, wherever he is, whatever he is, he went up to him. And the Lord called to him from the mountain and said, "This is what you are to say to the descendants of Jacob, and what you are to tell the people of Israel. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all the nations you'll be my treasured possession."
Okay, so we talked about the Sinai being the holy mountain and stuff before, with the burning bush and all that. We discussed all that. But the eagle's wings thing.
Yeah.
So, in the New International Version, the NIV Study Bible says that this description best fits the female golden eagle. Where that came from and why it matters, because they didn't ride the eagles like in Lord of the Rings. You know, I don't get it. The NRSV Cultural Background Study Bible, which I have been enjoying, it's been really great and giving me some more background and stuff. It says the bird in question is probably a griffin vulture.
Okay.
So I don't get it, but that also makes me think about that Graham Hancock documentary that came out on Netflix. Of course, I've read a couple of his books because I don't necessarily believe it, but I find it interesting. But he talks about this vulture thing being on, inscriptions from Göbekli Tepe and from all over the place. These vultures. So I don't understand, like, it. If it was just a metaphor, on eagle's wings, I brought you out. First off, no, it didn't happen that way. Not even metaphorically, because of all the, the grumbling and we're thirsty and we need food and everything else. It's not been as easy as, brought you out on eagle's wings or whatever. But, if what's it supposed to be hearkening back to if it's not a pure metaphor? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What I found when I was looking that up was that the eagles, we mentioned an eagle because the eagle is the highest bird. It flies the highest. So other birds below them would carry their young in their talons, so that eagles couldn't see that they had young and were thus vulnerable. Eagles' young are carried on their wings because eagles fear only man. No other bird can fly as high. This is what Rashi said. So eagles fly super high, so they don't fear other birds. They fear only man and his arrows, right? So you don't want to the way to not appear vulnerable to man.
Wasn't that a plot point in Avatar?
Is that, I haven't seen it, but maybe. I mean, there you go. And we know for a fact James Cameron has a heart for the Book of Exodus.
Oh yeah, I guess he does.
After seeing that documentary,
I forgot about that
timeline. No, but anyway, like that's what Rashi says about the eagle's wings.
No.
Sorry. No. Counterpoint.
Hang on, I've got a thing for this. I forgot. Basically, it was like, to quote Hamlet, and then it gives like the scene and the line and the stuff, and it's just no.
That's good. Yeah. I want to start doing that. That's good.
I'll try to remember it we'll bring it up in the future, maybe.
Let's see. So, Let me see. Where were we? I kind of been skipping around. So you got carried out of eagle's wings, and I brought you to myself. Now obey this covenant, and out of all the nations you'll be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be a kingdom. Will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you are to speak to the Israelites, Moses. So Moses went back and summoned all the elders and set before them all the words the Lord had commanded him to speak. The people all responded together. So in one unified chorus, we will do everything the Lord has said. So now I'm starting to get those vibes you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Everyone's speaking in unison. We will do everything the Lord has said. So
Yeah. Oh,
Moses,
and now it's a contract though. So
yeah, yeah, that's true. It's the Sinaitic covenant. So Moses brought their answer back to the Lord. Poor Moses. Goodness, having to go back and
yeah.
forth. It'd be if only this all-powerful God could speak to people directly. The Lord said to Moses, I'm going to come to you in a dense cloud so that the people will hear me. Or just
So that the people will
yeah.
hear me.
And so I had a note about this. Okay, so people will hear me with you, so that people will hear me speaking with you, and you'll always put their trust in you. Is this like a thundercloud, like lightning, and like
I had
what?
the exact same note.
Okay, yeah. Then Moses told the Lord what the people had said, back and forth, back and forth. This guy, just you'd think he would just be like, "Hey, why don't y'all come over here?"
Yeah, and it does say it later on that they're hearing the thunder and stuff like that. But
Yeah,
the absurdity of it, and then also like God calls Moses up to the mountain, and he's like, "Okay, now go back down and tell him."
yeah. I have a note for that too.
Yeah,
Um, so, all right. So here's what I want you to do. So God has a plan, and he's going to make good on all the things you and I, Chris, have been kind of complaining about, how he's been so distant from the people. Except he's
right,
just been using Moses. So Lord said to Moses, "Go to the people and consecrate them today." That I saw as various different translations kept using the word consecrate. It essentially just means prepare them, get them ready.
right. They got to
Uh,
wash their clothes and stuff.
Yep, have them wash their clothes and be ready by the third day, because on that day the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. Put limits around the mountain and say, don't go past this rope, because if you even set a foot on the base of the mountain, they will be put to death. Any person who
Right,
does that. They are to be stoned or shot with arrows. Do not lay a hand upon them. Only when the ram's horn sounds a long blast. Only when the ram's horn sounds a long blast may they approach the mountain. So God is threatening
kind
them
of.
with death. Yeah, that's true. But yeah, God's openly threatening these people with death if they come near the mountain. It's like a magician preparing his trick, right?
Yeah,
That's what comes to me. It's like Job on Arrested Development saying like, don't spin the apparatus around just yet. I don't want you to see the way it
yeah.
works. I'm trying to move my chair. Okay,
Don't
so
pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
exactly. I'm not a. What does he say? I'm not a bad man. I'm just a very bad wizard. So so what is it? I had something. I had a note on that. Oh yeah. So anyway, he's going to sound the shofar, and then they can approach the mountain, like you said, kinda. After Moses had gone down the mountain to the people, he prepared them. He consecrated them. He washed their clothes, and then because God does not want. Look, I know y'all been wandering for 2 months now, but if I see one speck of dirt,
Yeah.
and then he said to the people, "Prepare yourselves for the third day, and don't have sex."
Don't go near a woman.
Yeah.
Where did it come from?
Okay, I did
What
some
is
research. Do you want to hear this? It
I
gets a
am
little.
I am so stoked for this. Yes.
Okay, so he says, "Don't go near a woman." Here's why you don't go near a woman. So you can have sex as a man. You can have sex with a woman so long as she's not on her period. Ew, gross. Can't do that. That's immoral and gross. Like it makes you unclean. But for the next, so you can have sex the day before you're meant to be consecrated here. But you see, semen lasts for 3 days inside of this woman. This is the interpretation from Rashi, and I'm sorry that we're taking this blue
I
turn. So your semen is viable for 3 days inside of your partner. So you can't have sex for 3 days because what could happen is she's standing there within the next 3 days and semen just drips out of her body and gets on her body, on her outside of her body, which you can't have. You're not allowed to have that. He's put people to death for such things. That this
has
Lord
he?
has. Yeah, he killed freaking Onan, and he killed Onan for doing that with Tamar.
Oh, that's right. You're right.
Yeah.
Well,
So
but
and
that was
also,
for spilling the seed, not necessarily having it drip on you. This is for
well,
intentionally putting it on the ground.
say what I don't know. I guess I don't know what you're supposed to do. Anyway, so Rashi explicitly says The woman could emit semen after her immersion and become unclean again. After 3 days have elapsed since intercourse, the semen has become putrid and is no longer capable of fertilization. So it's pure from contaminating the woman who emits it.
So, but my question is, if this is all for ritual purity, whence comes the ritual? You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Like, how do they know?
Yeah. No, that's a good point. But
And if they knew this, why does need repeating? Don't go near a woman, especially when God didn't say that. God didn't say and tell them to stay away from women.
yeah, that's true. yeah. Stay away from women. Okay. So, anything else you want to talk to? You want to touch on when it comes to that?
No, I
Oh,
think we're
I had it.
okay
I remember
at
now
the
the
moment.
note that I had on the shofar. That is supposedly the ram's horn from Abraham's burnt offering when he was meant to
Oh, really?
kill Isaac, according to Rashi. According to Shabbat, I forget, Shabbat 86. No, I'm sorry. That's from Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer.
Okay, so if that's the case, then where does it come from?
Yeah,
Like,
they
and
had this thing.
I'm not talking about like them taking it with them to Egypt and holding on to it and everything else. What I'm getting at is in a minute when we talk about God, coming on the mountain in the form of a cloud and the thunder and all this stuff, the trumpet just the shofar, whatever you want to call it, just blasts.
Uh
Who's blasting it?
huh. yeah.
Did God like come into the camp and take it out secretly, or is it just magically sounding from within the trunk over
I
there?
have
Like,
no idea.
I
No
yeah,
idea. Good question. Where is the show? Who's sounding the shofar? And then,
I could see it being a supernatural thing when God comes down, but
uh
it
huh.
being this magical like relic from Abraham, like
Yeah. You shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have done that, Rashi. You shouldn't have said that it was a actual, like you said, relic, a thing that's been passed down through. How long has it been? 1,000 years? Like how long has it been since Abraham? It's been a long time.
it's been a long time. Well, let's see, it's 430 years in Egypt,
Mm-hmm.
so it's probably close to 1,000,
Yeah,
maybe
that's what I'm
less.
saying. Like all the lineages, all the
Yeah, yeah,
everyone lived to be 150 years old.
yeah.
So okay, uh, okay. So on the third day, there was thunder and lightning, very very frightening, with a thick cloud over the mountain and a very loud trumpet blast. Everyone in the camp trembled. Then Moses led the people out of the camp to meet God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. They're like, "Are you sure about this? Because this is a big deal. If we're unclean, we're going to be killed." And no one did my morning check. What's that thing that you do that you did in the military? Where you stand for your footlocker or whatever, and like,
Muster.
yeah, no one mustered us. There's no mustard here. So, Mount Sinai was covered with smoke because the Lord descended on it in fire. Okay, so is he a cloud or is he fire? Like, we're getting mixed signals here. The smoke billowed up from it like smoke from a kiln, and the whole mountain trembled violently
Now
as the sound of the.
every kiln I've ever seen has not been that smoky. Like, in order to get hot enough to be a kiln, the combustion's got to be pretty complete. So you get some smoke, you get some fire coming out the top, but it doesn't like billow thick smoke.
Hmm.
Even a wood fired kiln.
Well, maybe not. Maybe you haven't experienced kilns the size of mountains, Chris, because the
That's
whole
true.
mountain trembled violently as the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder. Moses spoke, and the voice of God answered him.
Who's playing the trumpet?
Well, you know what? It could just be. Yeah. So again, I like your interpretation better than the one that we got from Rabbi Eliezer because uh, it's clearly just so it grew louder and louder. That's as God drew nearer. That's just the sound
Right.
of God breaking the sound barrier as he crashes down onto the
Sure.
mountain, right?
Whatever he's God farting, I don't care. It's coming from God. That's the point.
Yeah, exactly. The Lord descended on top of the Mount Sinai and called Moses to the top of the mountain. So Moses went up, and the Lord said to him, "So God's like, hey, come on up here." And Moses like, okie dokie, didn't know we were
To
climbing
the
the mountain
top,
today.
to the
Yeah,
top of the mountain.
the tippy top. And he said, go down and warn the people so they do not force their way through to see the Lord, and many of them perish. So just to see me, and so that many of them will perish. And Moses is like, right, okay. And so he goes
So,
down.
but here's also the thing: the God earlier said that they can touch the mountain after the trumpet blows. So
Right.
the trumpet's now blown; they can come up.
Yeah, no, that's
And
right.
now, but he's going like, no, go back down, tell him.
And then God said to him, "Go down and warn the people so that they do not force their way through to see the Lord, and many of them will perish." My note was, why would God kill you
And
after having
why
already
not
sounded the
all of them?
trumpet? Yeah,
Like
exactly.
15
No,
people go
Reggie,
up,
no.
12 come down.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Even the priests who approach the Lord must consecrate themselves, or the Lord will break out against them. We've already
what
consecrated, dude.
priests?
Yeah, what priests? I mean, yeah, I guess these priests are the ones that have been appointed as judges among over people. These
I
officers.
suppose that could be, yeah. But still,
Moses
I
said to
mean,
the Lord, "The people cannot come up Mount Sinai because you." He said to the Lord, "The people cannot come up Mount Sinai because you yourself warned us. Put limits around the holy mountain and set it apart as holy." And God's like, "Yes, but I also said no." And then the Lord replied, "Go down and bring Aaron up with you. But the priests and the people must not force their way through to come to the Lord, or he will break out against them." And so Moses went back down and told the people. And that's it. That's it for chapter 19.
yeah. So
My note for 22, for
the
verse
people
22
can
was,
come up the mountain after the trumpet blows, but they can't come back up on the mountain, or else many of them will die.
yeah,
But also, Aaron's cool, and if there's any priests that come with you, but they're not supposed to come. But if they do come, they have to be consecrated properly.
yeah,
Uh,
man. Yeah, there's what is with this back and forth? That is so strange.
yeah, I don't
Um,
know.
okay, so we could pick up, we could continue on with with chapter 20, the 10 commandments, but as you put in the interregnum between the two episodes, I think this is a perfect time to leave off this
I
episode
think it is.
so that, yeah, we can pick up, because there is just so much to get into with the 10 commandments, and edit. There's so much happening with the Ten Commandments, and I did the research I did showed that there are bases in the Book of Jubilee, in
Yeah,
different interpretations of Genesis that show that this isn't really the first receipt of commands from God. So
right.
I would love to get into the explication of that when we can have the time to dedicate to it. So yeah, so that's an excellent point. That said, we still have a little bit of time. Is there anything else you wanted to cover over these last three chapters we just discussed?
No, I don't think so. I think this is a good place to stop. I think we need, when we pick it back up, keep in mind that Aaron is with Moses, or supposed to be at least. Um, but yeah, I think this is a good leaving off point.
Yeah. Um, Yeah. Let's see. So 19:9, real quick. I have this note. What did he tell the Israelites? He said here, 19:9. I want to make sure. Well, it says, "I'm going to come to you in a dense cloud." They want to hear from God Himself. They weren't saying, "Oh yeah." So yeah, that's true. In 19:9, he says, "I'm going to come to you in a dense cloud so that the people will hear me speaking with you and will always put their trust in you." So, but what's he going to say? What's he going to say there as a
Yeah,
cloud that he hasn't already? This, it's just more of the same stuff. It's more of the same, like, you know, we've heard this before. God, you're capable of all these things. And now what? We get to hear your voice as a rumbling cloud. So now it's going to prove something to us that we haven't already been given plenty of excuse to see it proven. All right, that being said, I suppose there's nothing more to discuss. I guess we'll pick up with the Ten Commandments, chapter 20 on the next one. And until that time, I am Jeff,
I'm Chris,
and this has been Eating the Apple.
and I have to pee.